Hogan Assessments just dropped research that proves what we've all suspected. The people getting promoted into leadership and the people employees want to work for, two completely different set of traits. Imagine that. Download their free global report at hogan.to/I hate it here. This is The Leadership Divide, a special podcast series with Hogan Assessments in partnership with I Hate It Here. I'm Hebba Youssef, and across 4 episodes, we're getting into one genuinely uncomfortable idea. Leadership doesn't fail for lack of effort. It actually fails because organizations select and develop leaders on the wrong criteria, and then maybe act shocked when it doesn't work. So here's the premise we're working with for these 4 special episodes. Trust in institutions is fragile. The old assumptions about what work is supposed to be have eroded, and the people on your team are quietly rewriting what they actually need from a leader. So that's where we're starting. And for episode 1, I'm joined by Allison Howell, the CEO of Hogan Assessments, where she leads the company's global strategy, product innovation, and market growth. As CEO, she's responsible for advancing Hogan's mission to deliver scientifically rigorous, ethical, and impactful personality assessments that support better talent decisions worldwide. If anyone can tell me why this moment matters and why it matters right now, it's her. Allison, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to dig in with you on this topic. I feel like it's something I've talked about so often, and the fact that you have done this work and have so much research behind it. I'm just so eager to get into it. So the Leadership Divide was a report that you all released, and you actually wrote a leadership letter to open up that report. What were you seeing in the data, or honestly just out in the world, that made you sit down and say, I have to write this letter and I have to start this report this way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been really thinking about this topic for such a long time, and was kind of throwing a bunch of different ideas around, rolling them around in my head of, okay, how do I approach this topic? And concurrently, we were doing all this data collection on what people want in a leader. And a couple of things just kind of came to light for me at the same time. One, there was this research report from Edelman about this growing mistrust of institutions. And then our data talking about this gap that exists with the leaders we have and the leaders we want. And it just really brought everything together in such an interesting way for me that I was like, this is the opening. This is exactly what we need to talk about, because this trust has been just declining for years. I've been giving talks all over the world for the last several years and looking at it. And I feel like it's really coming to a head right now.
Yeah. I mean, like, we throw around the word inflection point. You say it's coming to a head, but like, what do you think specifically has shifted, and what maybe is different about how leading people now versus what it was like 5 years ago?
Yeah, well, actually, so I think it's great to go back 5 years ago, because I think this is where changes really started to accelerate. Well, I guess 6 years ago now with the start of COVID. Yeah. And I've been kind of paying attention for a little while of this shifting, I refer to it as the shifting contract between employers and employees, and expectations that you as a worker have for your employers, that, this whole loyalty contract just doesn't exist anymore, that if employees are being laid off so quickly with, seemingly without a whole lot of thought, and lives are just upended. And so the expectation that employees have for their employers to, contribute to their livelihoods doesn't exist. And at the same time, employers, I think, continue to think that employees are going to be loyal and they're going to be driven by the same types of things. So there's been some interesting research. Mercer puts out an annual report on the global state of the workforce, and they've been talking about this shift in a while, and kind of in the hierarchy, or in the framework of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how a lot of these basic needs aren't getting met anymore, and expectations that we have are shifting. COVID totally accelerated that. And when people went home, people were working from their office, and I mean, millions of people were dying. People were sick. We were afraid to have social interactions. It really puts things into this harsh light of what is important to me and what isn't. And work is just much lower down on the list than it used to be. And employers and leadership haven't quite gotten that message. And we now see, I think, the acceleration of AI is this other part that's bringing it all now to what I see as this inflection point, that the challenges that we're facing are now accelerating at a pace that we've never seen before, even in times of other industrial revolutions. It's just bringing it all to light that, hey, we have to really kind of consider what's important for ourselves and what's important for humanity.
Yeah. It used to be, and I just remember like COVID was just, first of all, such a wild time. Like there was, I don't think I actually said this recently, like I don't think anything will compare to 2020, but 2025 actually took the cake for me because that's like when the AI stuff really started to take off.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like nothing could rock my world in HR more than 2020. And then 2025 showed up and said, wait a second, let me show you what it could actually be like. And it's been interesting watching this because like in the past, maybe like early in my career, it did feel like we idolized leadership in a really, I don't want to say naive and offend anybody, but it felt like we held these leaders on like such a pedestal and everyone admired them. Like everyone knew who the Facebook CEO was, who was the CEO of Google, like Apple, everyone knows their names, their daily household names. And now I feel like since COVID and beyond, it really feels like we've opened a really critical eye to leadership as employees, as society, as like social media has taken off. There's been a lot of interesting discourse around these leaders might actually not be that great. And I think it's turning around and also making us question the institutions that we've so long have believed in. And so like with trust in institutions being so fragile right now, how does that big like macro level erosion kind of show up inside our teams on a regular day at work? Like how might we experience it?
Honestly, it shows up in almost every aspect of our interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of difficult to talk about in ways that I just don't fully understand because I myself, I'm in this leadership position and by all accounts, I'm living the dream, I guess. But the reality is that work is tough. We're expected to get up every day and kind of put our lives aside and respond to emails and do meetings and make decisions throughout the day. And yet the economy is really difficult. I have 2 young children and I'm constantly pulled away to take care of my kids and, pick them up at school, et cetera, et cetera. Politics is insane. We're just the threat of AI. I mean, how many articles do you read a week of AI is going to replace the workforce and workers are going to be displaced and it's the end of humanity and things like that. I mean, it's these really huge, huge things that we're just apparently supposed to just set aside and go about our days at work. And I find that to be just such a wild premise that work shouldn't be interrupted by this stuff. And so people can't separate that. And when they come to work, that stress is there and that stress is mounting. And then to your point, like the way that leadership is viewed has shifted drastically. And I think that we see these big political figures, or sometimes political figures, other times like it's the tech leaders and things that are just constantly in the media pushing an agenda, but are increasingly out of touch with reality. And you think, is that what we're striving for? Is that what I want? Do I want to be that out of touch with humanity and the people that I work with? No, I don't think so. So, the question of how it shows up, it's like, I don't know that you can even like extricate it from, you can't say this is it. It impacts everything that we do. It impacts motivation, impacts our relationships, and impacts the ways that we communicate with our team members. It's just ever present.
Yeah. I just always tell people like, if you're thinking about like trust in the workplace, you should just assume potentially you're operating from a place where your workers don't trust you. I just say like, even if you think like you're doing all the right things, just think to yourself, like, what if they didn't trust me? How do I then show up and actually build that trust? And I think for HR, one of the biggest things is like, we have to do the things we say we're going to do. That's like the number one place where I see it fail. So like, you can't go out and preach like we have the best, most inclusive, most equitable culture. And then there be issues where that's not actually the case, because that trust then gets ruined. And I do think like, even as HR teams, it's really hard to get the employees to trust you. But I think even as managers too, like employees really do struggle trusting their manager, that their manager has the best interests for them, that their manager should even be a manager. Like how many managers do you and I know that like maybe shouldn't be managers? So,
bad beyond management is like the status quo.
It's fascinating because I do think like it's causing us to like look at our leaders and ask ourselves like, what do I actually want out of them? So when employees are doing this, when they're going through this and they're thinking to themselves, like, I want to reassess what I actually want from a leader, what are they really asking for? And do you think it's even reasonable?
So I love this question because the reasonable component of it, this comes up anytime we're talking about some of this data collection that we've been doing.
Yeah.
Like, can we really trust what people say that they want? And there's such almost an infantilizing way of looking at the question because, it's a fair question, right? Because we know that it's human nature to dislike management or people in power. That's just kind of the way that we are structured. So there's going to be an element of it where like what I want is maybe not what is right for the business. But what we found in the data is that the things that people are looking for are communication, decision-making skills, accountability, integrity. And so going back to the question, is that reasonable? Like, yeah, absolutely. That's reasonable. That's kind of table stakes, I think. But what the interesting part of this is that when we look at the data for the people who are truly in leadership roles, those are not the top competencies that they are displaying. And so we do see this really big gap. And to think, and you're far from the only person who's asking the question, to think that looking at good communication skills, integrity, accountability, it might be an unreasonable ask. It's like, whoa, okay, how far away from like what's reasonable have we gotten? And the other side of it is that we see in the leaders that we have are really all about that visibility and presentation skills, charisma, social networking, and things like that get attention, but they don't actually contribute to team cohesion and performance and things like that.
So the employees want specific, like things that you and I would consider table stakes. And the report, I think, and maybe you said this, like shows that those aren't actually the top competencies that leaders tend to have.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
I'm not surprised there's so much friction between employees and leadership because clearly they're not getting what they want. And I mean, like, I think what they want is reasonable. Like communication, I think is like a core skill in this digital age, right? I'm like, you should all know how to compete. I feel like that's like, we should be teaching that. The other interesting thing when I think about leadership too, is like so many people end up in management or leadership roles, not because necessarily they wanted them, but because they were just good at the job and they kept moving up the chain. How often do you think like that's coming into play here? Like where people are moving up simply because they're good at the job, or they don't even want it, but they see it as the only way forward. So they just tend to be on that path, even though they're not equipped for it. We don't train them and they don't have the skills.
It happens quite frequently because people end up getting promoted for skills and their ability to do a job that they're hired into. And the fact is, and you know this, I think anyone in HR knows this, that management and leadership is not the same thing as being able to do a job, especially if it's more of a technical job. Managing people, setting strategy, that's a very different skill set. And we're told this story about how this is kind of the dream and you need to have this ambition to climb the corporate ladder and go into management roles. And the fact is that it's really hard. And a lot of times it's thankless. And so it's not the right dream that we should be presenting to people because it's not for everybody.
Oh, I love that. I told this story once on a virtual event where like in one of my earlier roles, I suggested like an anti-management program where like if someone truly was not a good manager, we could slowly take away some of their management duties and then like try to build them up and then give them back the management duties. And my boss at the time was like, that is an absolutely wild idea. We will not be doing that. Like we need these managers. And I was like, it's just like they don't get training. Like we know managers don't get training, and then they're the people who have like the most impact on employees day to day, and they don't even have the skills that employees are looking for their like manager or leader to have. And that friction, I think, causes so much chaos at work. Like
so much chaos.
I'm
Absolutely.
like, I'm not coming to work. Like life is already chaotic. I would like to come to work and it be like stable. And I just find that like a lot of management's inability to be a manager or leadership's ability to be a leader is what is causing more strife at work than anything else.
Yeah, it is absolutely true. And I think what's really difficult is that when you look towards, what does leadership look like? The examples that you look to are just bad examples, right? You see politicians in the news all the time with bad behavior. You see TV shows that have, leadership roles, bosses that are representing sort of extreme behavior. But when you're in the role and you're trying to make decisions, you think, okay, what would somebody else do in this situation? So you're kind of the examples that you have in your head, this framework is just bad. It's a faulty foundation.
Yeah. Okay, I need to talk about this real quick because it absolutely sent me. Hogan Assessments compared personality data from over 21,000 executives against what nearly 10,000 employees across 25 different markets want from a leader. When they looked at the top 5 competencies of current executives versus the top 5 competencies employees are begging for, guess what they found? That there's zero overlap. I wish I was joking. Hogan has the world's largest database of personality research, and they used it to create a free global report called The Leadership Divide. It quantifies the gap so you can finally stop explaining it in every skip level you've ever had. Download it at hogan.to/I hate it here. It's so funny, Six. When you said bad leaders in the media, I was just thinking of like Michael Scott. And I'm like, that is like from The Office. I'm like, that is the worst representation of a manager. But every time I find myself watching like a workplace TV show, I'm always like, no one would really do that. And then I have to stop and like ask myself, like, maybe they wouldn't do it in environments I've worked in, but like this could be happening, right? So you see such a broad range of like bad management examples, people getting away with it, like such an interesting piece of media to consume is when you see this stuff at work and then you're like, that's not actually happening. And then you hear from a friend, it actually is happening. And it's just such a fascinating thing. As we're like looking at this moment, where like trust in institutions is low, trust in leadership is low, leadership doesn't have the capabilities that employees are really looking for. Like, what do you think the cost is of reading this moment kind of incorrectly and potentially maybe using like the old playbook that's always worked?
So I could get really dark with this question if you want me to.
Yes, please. My audience loves that. Actually, let's start with the dark, and then we could go to like,
and we can walk back a little bit. Yeah. So, I honestly, I don't think it's a overstatement to say that the cost can be catastrophic. And I say that partly from kind of a research perspective, looking at history and where this culture, societies have like grown or failed because of leadership. I mean, leadership is really, really impactful. So that part isn't the overstatement. I think the part where maybe it is an overstatement is looking ahead, looking at the impact of AI, looking at some of the big pushes to, adopt or die. And everybody needs to start adopting this tool that makes us dumber, that is ruining the environment, that is sending people into delusional thinking to the point that there have been suicides and things like that. Sorry, I probably should have a trigger warning for that. Or institutionalized. I mean, there are some really extreme cases, and there's a lot of effects with AI, with the way that people are adapting to it in the work environment that are probably more subtle, but equally nefarious in terms of like getting in at like the day-to-day decision making and shifting the way that people are going about their day and no longer having the responsibility for their own decisions because it's outsourcing things to AI. And so if you play that out, you could kind of be set on this direction that could be quite catastrophic. So that's kind of the worst case scenario of, not having a say in let's slow things down and take a look at the people who are making these decisions about the direction we're going and the direction we're adopting tech and things like that. I'll stop there for a second because that's pretty doomsday.
I actually love the dark side of it because I think we have to be able to know about what the worst, always when I'm planning things in HR, I'll plan one thing and my first thought is always what's the worst possible thing that could happen. And I'll go down that spiral just to make sure that we are prepared for whatever it is we're doing. And so I do think when AI entered the workplace and people started saying, oh, it's going to take your jobs, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. The bias, it's trained on everything that's out in the world, but everything out in the world is extremely biased because we don't have a lot of data about women or underrepresented groups in the workplace either. So there's a lot to be said about it. And I think we have to be mindful of that as HR because blindly adopting any new technology or tool, I just think is a risky situation for you. I talk about how to use AI, but I also talk about the dark side of it, the bias, the impact to the environment. I hate data centers, and we're currently like battling. They might want to build more data centers near us. Like there's a lot out there that we have to be mindful of. I think the thing about AI that scares me the most, and I talk about this a lot, is I don't want to start sounding like everybody else. And when I put things into AI and it spits it back to me, I'm like, but I would never say this to like my direct report. I would never talk to her like this. I would never lead like this. This is not how. So I just worry the most, honestly, about the fact that when we start outsourcing the things that do require the human touch, that do require that like inspirational leader moment, that we just miss the mark completely and our opportunity to connect with one another.
Right. Yeah. And the risk with that is that I think AI is really good at sounding smart enough.
Yeah.
But it is not, it can't replace good judgment. It can't replace true expertise in a subject matter. I mean, at some point it might, but right now, I mean, I've noticed that you probably have started to see this too, that when you get an email or you see a post on social media, you can clock it immediately. Whereas, a year ago, I don't think I could have done that. But now I see I call it the hard reframe of like, it's not this, it's this.
that.
You see that everywhere. And every time I do it, even if it's genuine, I just immediately think, okay, that's AI. And I can't really trust what this is saying anymore.
Yeah. And like trust is already, right?
Yes, exactly.
And like we started this talking about trust in institutions and leadership. Now there's like one more tool that's also making us distrust each other. Maybe like I'm out there like, did this person actually do this job, or did they just ask AI how to do this job? And now they're giving people advice on how to do it.
Yes, absolutely. I find myself, I have to catch myself sometimes because I do use AI pretty frequently. And, there are lots of things that can speed up in the day. So I'm not anti-AI, but I do find myself, if I see something come from a coworker, like, this was written by AI, and I immediately want to discount what they're doing. And I think, well, wait a second, I'm using it too. I can't judge that. It doesn't mean that this is not good, but it does really make you question, like, are they actually using critical thinking when they're doing this? Are they using this based on their judgment or what AI is telling them? And so the way that the behavior is driven by that is like I said, it's subtle, but it can have a really big impact.
I spend a lot of time arguing with AI, which I'm just training the model, but like I am like, that's not what someone would do. Like I'm yelling at it half the time and I'm like, I got to stop doing this. Like genuinely spent 30 minutes last week arguing with it on something. And I'm like, why did you think that was a good idea? And then it was like, well, because of this and that. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like I had to like pull myself out of it because I was like, I should not be doing this right now. I do not spend 30 minutes arguing with them because I don't like their approach to like this thing that I would do. But that's the dark side. Okay. We talked a little bit about like the dark side. What do you think is the flip side then of getting it? Like if the cost of reading this moment wrong, like what's the less catastrophic version of what you and I just went through?
Yeah. So the less catastrophic version is still bad, but it feels a little bit more manageable. And those are the things that we see play out day to day: loss of engagement, difficult team dynamics, loss of productivity, kind of a hit to the bottom line. It's the kind of thing where I still think it is pretty catastrophic, but it is kind of smaller scale where people really hate coming to work. They're either going to leave or they're going to slow walk everything, and they're going to be really difficult to work with. And that impacts team dynamics in such a real and frustrating way for, if you're somebody who is trying to do your best work and somebody else is coming to work and they're just like, I don't care. I don't want to do this. I'm just showing up because I need a paycheck. That impacts everything. Right. So, so some of it's bottom line, some of it's morale, some of it's engagement. But it all kind of comes back to just making work a harder place to be at.
Yeah. I just think like the old playbook is not working anymore. Like if you're trying to, it just doesn't work. It didn't work it was starting to crack pre 2020. And I just think 2020 took away everything. And then now again, I feel like it's breaking all over again with AI. And so like, if you are looking at like the modern leadership, I would not potentially like adopt principles from pre 2020. I would like really be thinking about like, what do our leaders need to be successful? What do our employees want from them? What skills do we think about? The next 3 episodes, we're actually going to go into like the dark side of leadership, like how we pick the wrong people, what it costs. I'm so excited about this series, but what is one assumption you most want listeners to question through those next 3 episodes about leadership?
it's hard to distill it down into just one assumption, but I think like the through line for me is that the assumption that like the way that leadership is defined and the way that people embody leadership is most likely not good. And we're in a weird, it's hard to kind of talk about that, but I feel like it in my day to day is like, this is kind of a new frontier. Trying to carve a new path for what leadership looks like is really difficult because you don't have like the previous decisions, previous, people to look to as to like, how did this work? Or you do, but it takes a lot longer to try to find those examples. So this is very much a new frontier, but I think the more we can talk about what a new playbook could look like, talk about these things. This is why I love this podcast, that you're openly discussing some of the things that make work really difficult. And that's the kind of thing that helps shape the new playbook and say, okay, we don't need it to be this way anymore. This is a much better path, and we'll hopefully see it play out. So I think that assumption that what has worked in the past could work again, that's what's fundamentally incorrect.
Yeah. I also think, like, for me, if I were to tell people to question one thing, it's like letting go of the assumption that a good leader is just one thing, just looks one way. Because it is different depending on the environment you're in, the industry you're in, the company size you're in. I think like leadership is one of the hardest things we have to deal with in HR, because a lot of our initiatives don't necessarily, like, yes, they might come from us, but they get empowered through the leaders. And so if we have bad leaders, it can make every single HR thing we do, candidly, a nightmare.
Yes.
And so it's
100%.
remembering that like leaders can look and be so different, and really thinking about like, what does a leader need to thrive in my organization? And I also think it's like questioning your leaders. I don't know. I have a lot of gripes with leadership, and it's funny because I've worked with so many early stage founders, and founders are like a different form of leadership too. Cause like they started it's their company. It's like their thing. How do you help them understand that nobody is going to care as much as them about something? And that's not a bad thing. And that's not a bad thing. It's okay that your employees don't care, because they don't own it the way you do. So I don't know.
Exactly.
Leadership is my favorite topic, and I could gab about this forever. Every episode we're going to ask the same through line question to every guest. What's one thing organizations keep getting wrong about how they choose and develop their leaders? And what would it look like if they actually did it right?
To me, this is about the processes that we use to select and develop. And sometimes, it's hard to say blanket statements. I think sometimes they are an afterthought and not, really given the attention necessary to have really good, clear processes.
Yeah.
The other part is, it's not a new idea, but the over-reliance on our own biases. We think that we can judge people really well, and we do not. We're really bad at it. And so processes that are data-driven with good data, and that's the clarifying thing, is AI does not produce good data. Sometimes it's making sure that you're using tools and processes that actually are shown to get at like the core things needed to do the job well, and not just the people that we like or that, are similar to us, that sort of thing.
If I had $1 for every time a manager tried to promote someone without any real facts, I might not be doing this job. I'm just kidding. I'll probably still be doing this job. I know I'm more than that, but it is like, I like that you call that out, because a lot of our processes are somewhat rooted in bias. And I think a promotion process is like always where I hear HR leaders getting the most strife when they're going back and forth with leadership on who they're promoting and why, has always just been like a really interesting discussion point. What would it look like to get it right? Like to actually be right about how they pick and develop leaders?
Well, I think there's a few different ways that you can look at it. But I mean, I think if you can get it right, you have a manager who shows up every day and is caring and compassionate, but driven towards clear goals, good communicator, the things that we talked about.
Yeah.
For the employee, I think that means just more satisfaction, more desire to show up and contribute and get along. And for myself and for pretty much anybody, I think if you can find yourself in a role and an environment that is just really like the right fit for you, you can't beat that feeling, right? You want to go back to work and you want to contribute. And so if we can get these pieces in the right spot, then everybody's lives just improve instantly.
Yeah, would agree. Honestly, that sounds kind of dreamy. Allison, our time together is done today, but you'll be back for another episode. So I get to pick your brain more on more of these things. I have had such a fun time talking about leadership today. I'm more so usually venting about leadership, but I can't wait to get deeper into the data, because like when we talked initially, it was the fact that people want something from their managers and their leaders, and the data just showing that leaders are not actually competent at those things. That gap is wild to me. And we're going to get so much more into it in here. And thank you for today and like setting the stage for this 4-part mini series. And I can't wait to have you back on a future episode.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
I will talk to you soon.